Welcome in to the Tuesday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We got a three-way podcast going today. Blake Lovell and Barry Allen with us. My dog is joining us too. You may or may not hear him in the background. But in any case, guys, we've got a lot to talk about. We've got baseball in full swing. We've got a new number one at the top, according to some polls. But first, let's start with basketball. And Blake, we talked about Alabama. And would we see the version of the Crimson Tide that just was running away with the Southeastern Conference in January? And lo and behold, we saw that bunch again on Monday night. Alabama just blitzed Maryland in that game. Let's start with you, Blake, because I know we all watched it. Your impressions of what Alabama did to Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I was that surprised, and I feel like we talked about that on Monday. I said I just didn't think this was – I thought UConn was a worse matchup for Alabama than Maryland, and I just did not see a scenario where I thought that, Maryland could keep up with them unless they just made it their type of game and slowed this thing to a halt. And when you play a team like Alabama, that's really hard to do. And so once Alabama got going, you just felt like that Maryland never really had a shot. And that's just the way it works. That's why Alabama's a number 2 seed in the tournament, why they, at this point, have a really good shot to make the Final Four, I think, because when you look at the way they play, they speed you up to the point to where you just cannot keep up at times. And if they're making threes, it's over. Like, there is no chance. Like, you have to shoot, have one of the best shooting performances of your entire season to try to be able to keep up with them. And it just doesn't work that way. Maryland, I think the most threes they'd given up in a game this year was 14 heading into this one. Alabama had 14 with what? I think, 12 minutes left in the second half, something like that. So that's just, that's why Alabama's so good, is when they are hitting shots, they're capable of beating you by 20 plus. Even if they're not hitting shots, their defense is so good that that they can pretty much make things very difficult on you. And, I don't even know. Do you think Alabama had the best defensive performance? Probably not, but it didn't matter. When you knock down 16 threes and shoot 58% from 2 and make all of your free throws, you're going to win pretty much every game you play. And so I can't say I was completely shocked by this because I just didn't think Maryland was the type of team that matched up well with Alabama.
Blake, it felt like we were watching that LSU game again for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it did, and that's the thing, is that's why I keep going back to it. Everybody keeps talking about, well, if Alabama's not making shots, then they're going to lose. And I just, that doesn't work, because this team is such a good shooting team that even if they hit like half of those threes, their defenses, I think, is still to the point to where they're good enough to find other ways to score. They don't just need to rely on it. But when they do and they're able to hit those shots, you can't stop them. And I think it's just that's the problem that I think UCLA is going to run into. If Alabama wins that one, I think it's the same problem that Michigan and Florida State will run into. It's just you've got to be able to find a way to guard these guys. And even when you do, they still hit contested threes. So it's just, this is a very unique team. And that's why they are sitting here at 26-6. And again, have a pretty good shot, I think, to make the Final Four. So,
Barry, I wanted to get your impressions of what you saw Monday night out of Alabama.
Well, I thought they played really well, and Blake touched on their 3-point shooting. They're 19 of 33 from 2, and they're 16 of 33 from 3, and they made all 10 of their free throws. And when you shoot like that in a game, it's hard to beat a team that can shoot the ball with that accuracy. And they played really well last night. I mean, it looked like they were having a lot of fun. Gene Stallings always said the fun was in the winning. And they certainly looked like they were having a lot of fun last night. You look at there was almost a carbon copy. Both halves was almost, mirror images of each other. They shoot 17 of 33 in the first half, 18 of 33 in the second half. And they were 8 of 17 from 3 in the first half and 8 of 16 from 3 in the second half. So, I mean, they were very well balanced. They took as many twos as they did threes, and they made 3 more twos than they did threes. And I thought, Jahvon Quinerly played pretty well, making it just his second start of the year. He had 6 points and 6 rebounds. 6 points and 7 rebounds in a start. And I thought Quinerly coming off the bench was huge, 14 points and 11 assists. He had 5 rebounds and played really well. Shot 6 of 15 from the field. Was 4 of 9 from twos and 2 of 6 from 3. I thought he really gave them a tremendous spark off the bench. But I thought that was a better matchup for them than UConn. I think UCLA is a good matchup for them in the next round, and then we'll see what happens when they get to either Michigan or Florida State in the Elite Eight. If assume they get by UCLA.
Barry, there's two stats that say a lot about how good this team is. One of them is Herb Jones, and everybody knows Herb Jones is their best player, and I think by most people's opinion was the best player in the league this year. Herb Jones only plays 17 minutes, gets 4 fouls, only scores 6 points. If you know that going in, you're thinking, okay, that might be the recipe whereby Alabama gets upset. But then you look at something else. There's 16 of 33 from 3, as we mentioned. But here's another one. When to go with that, you also have 19 assists to 10 turnovers. If you know those two stats going in, you can pretty much go ahead and write Alabama in ink. And I think the way that those two play together, they say that Alabama can do this without playing at their best because it will find other ways to do it. And I just think that the way that it beat Maryland by not clicking on all cylinders with regards to Herb Jones just says so much about how good this team is and how well coached it is.
And I also think how deep it is. I mean, you mentioned Jones played 17 minutes, got into foul trouble. And, Mark Turgeon said that last night. He said their best player, hardly was even on the floor. He said he got into foul trouble and, really just wasn't out there much. And, they still destroyed us. And then you look, Reese only played 16 minutes. Primo played a little bit more. Bruner played 2 minutes. Rojas played 2 minutes. I mean, those are, big time contributors. You take Reese and Bruner and Rojas, and, they're 3 big time contributors. They played a total of 20 minutes, and Herb Jones only played 17. I think, it shows you the balance of this team, how deep they are. And it's not, it's not just one guy every night. I mean, they had 5 guys last night in double figures. Shackelford had 21 to lead the way, and Petty Jr. had 20, and then you had Quinerly at 14, Reese at 13, and Primo at 10. And it's just their depth and their balance is what's so good for this team. And they play they play well together. And like I said earlier, they look like they're just having a lot of fun. And that goes a long way. It's a long season. They played 32 games. They had no COVID pauses. They played really well at stretches. Started the season not very good, played really well, and had another little stretch of a lull, and then just ran through the SEC. I mean, they're 19-3 in the SEC, 19-2 in the SEC, counting the postseason. So I mean, it's just a deep team that just plays good together and has a lot of depth.
Blake, I want to talk about Jahvon Quinerly for a moment, because when we did our selecting our 14 best players in the league, which, by the way, we're going to revisit that again once all basketball in the league has been completed, because I think that puts a bow on it. I do think that postseason matters, and I think it'll matter in our final rankings. But Jahvon Quinerly was not a guy we talked about as much relative to his teammates. When we did our 14, we had Herb Jones in there, we had Shackelford in there, we had John Petty in there, and I think all 3 of those guys were deserving. But Quinerly was not the guy that we really talked about in terms of maybe being a 4th guy for Alabama who belongs in there. But he has now scored double figures in 14 straight games. He handed out a season-high 11 assists. And remember, this is a kid who played a big role at Villanova and was, I think a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. Well, I say played a big role at Villanova, and maybe not as much as I thought now that I look at it. But point is, he was a very talented kid coming out of high school who signed with an elite program. What do you think he means for this team going forward?
No, I mean, he's significant. I mean, he's certainly, I don't know, I guess you could, if you rank the players on Alabama in terms of the order of importance to getting them to, a Final Four, I'd say he has to be, top 4, I would think. Herbert Jones, I think Petty and Shackelford are probably, in those 4 guys. I feel like those are kind of the ones that drive what they're able to do. And it's, it's not just them, though. And we know that, I think, for Alabama, it's just all the other guys that are contributing. But there's no doubt. I mean, whenever they brought him in, that's what people were saying. Well, are you going to get the guy who at Villanova just did not work out? And I was one that kept saying, hey, we've seen this so many times before with kids where sometimes you go to school and it just simply doesn't work out. It's not necessarily I don't know, it doesn't really, I guess, tell us a lot about your talent or your potential. It's just maybe it wasn't the right fit. And, we've seen kids transfer all over the place now. And I think that's kind of, you see it in some situations where it's not that the player wasn't good enough to play at a certain school. It's just, it simply wasn't the right fit for him. And when you think about it, I think people were way too quick just to rush to judgment and say, well, he can't play at Villanova. How's he going to play at Alabama or some of these other schools? Well, guess what? What's the thing that differentiates Villanova and Alabama? They play a completely different style. Alabama plays one of the fastest tempos in the country. Villanova plays one of the slowest tempos in the country. So I think fit-wise, it just didn't work for whatever reason. But I think he is in the system that he absolutely needed to be in. He was a 5-star recruit for a reason. They don't just hand those out to guys who who may be not as good, and we're just we're gonna slap this 5-star on this guy. No, he's that talented and in the right fit, which obviously he has now in Alabama. He's one of the best guards in the league. So I think that's something that has been such a huge boost for them. And I feel like some people did not maybe look at that enough going into the season, where maybe we didn't give enough credit to the fact that he was going to play such a significant role, but basically just looking at what he did at Villanova and thinking, well, maybe he's not going to be as good as we thought he was coming out of high school. But he has been, and like you said, I mean, to have 14 points, 11 assists, he really doesn't turn the ball over that much either. He's been really good.
Well, they also got Josh Primo back last night. He played well for them also.
Yeah, he did, and I mean that's what we keep going back to is, my goodness, just go up and down and look at the guys that they have on this roster that can either play on the perimeter, you can call them guards, wings, whatever. They have so many different options, and that's why I think Nate Oates has had the success he's had. It is a guards game, and that's not to knock forwards and centers, but I think when you play the type of style that he plays, you have to have not just a couple guards, not just 3 guards. You got to have 4 or 5 different guys that you think can play out on the perimeter, which, again, I mean, Primo's kind of a wing type player. But, I mean, really, in Alabama's system, I feel like everyone's a guard except for, Jordan Bruner and Alex Reese and guys like that. So that's just kind of how it feels with the way they play sometimes. So, they've got so many different guys that can play that type of role and really fit with the style. And I think that's something that you want to talk about giving a coach credit. Like Nate Oates, he clearly knows the guys that can fit into what he wants to do and play how he wants to play. And, Josh Primo, another guy who came in, we knew he was a 5-star kid coming in. But it's like you looked ahead and you're like, well, they've got this guy and they've got this guy. How's he going to find a way into the rotation? Well, he certainly has. And once again, they have so many different options. And that's a luxury this time of year.
Blake, what'd you think about LSU Michigan last night? That was a fun game to watch, really, till almost the finish. I think it was the LSU we expected offensively. Defense, again, been the issue with them all year, was again last night. But LSU at least gave us a good showing on the way out, and that's probably our last look at Cam Thomas. If so, he went out in a blaze of glory. I mean, that kid is such a phenomenal shooter, just in terms of his mechanics and everything. I'll miss watching him. But what was your take on that one last night?
Yeah, no, I thought LSU played about as well as you expected. I think when you look at it defensively, were they perfect? No, but I think what we have to remember, too, is Michigan's one of the most efficient offensive teams in the entire country. So I can't say that I expected LSU to come out and play a perfect defensive game, just knowing what they were going up against. And so I think just for the circumstance, I thought they played about as well as you could play. Did they have some defensive lapses? Yeah, they did. But, I mean, so did Michigan, I guess. And so it's just like, I thought that they had their opportunities. I don't want to harp on this because anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I have seemingly been power ranking the worst charge calls I've ever seen in the history of basketball over the past couple weeks here in the NCAA tournament, or the past week. I thought the charge call on Cam Thomas completely swung the momentum a little bit. And I know Michigan was already up. What were they, up 6, I think, at the time? But, man, that was just a brutal call on the charge that was not even close to a charge. And, if they score there, it's a 4-point game. They have the momentum swinging back in their favor. And then I don't remember what happened after that, but I want to say Michigan, I can't remember if they scored right off of that or not, but it was just a terrible call. And that's one thing I thought they could have changed, maybe the way that game plays out. But, for the most part, I thought LSU was the better team for the majority of the game, but then they just had, they couldn't stop Michigan down the stretch, and they just, give Michigan credit for that. They hit shot after shot, and so yeah, it was a really good game. Again, I think if you looked at it overall, I don't know that LSU was ever really an 8 seed. And I think for them, to kind of have to draw this spot against Michigan was just not ideal. When, if you put them up, I think if you put LSU, which you obviously couldn't have put them up against Alabama, but if LSU is a 7 seed and you put them up against Iowa, a team like Iowa or Ohio State or Roberts or Houston, I feel like LSU is probably in the Sweet 16 right now, but that's what we talk about. The NCAA tournament's about matchups, and unfortunately, drawing the 8 seed, that put them in a really tough matchup here against Michigan. But they played really well, and just couldn't get enough stops down the stretch.
Yeah, the Thomas charge call, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm watching the game. I'm a little distracted with family stuff at times, but and I'm not on Twitter too, where you get a lot of the reaction, or I wasn't last night at least. I watched that, thought, yeah, he maybe chicken winged him a little bit, but that's not a charge call. I didn't think the announcers really made a big deal of it at the time, but I'm watching, without any outside influence, thinking the same thing.
Well, that one was bad. I still don't know it's as bad as the one I saw in Illinois and Loyola Chicago the other day, where the Loyola player down the stretch jumps up to make a pass to his teammate on the opposite corner, and the Illinois player just kind of stumbles and never actually falls or does anything, and they called a charge on that. It was probably the worst one I've ever seen. I'd probably put this one a little bit behind that. There was also one in the women's tournament. I can't remember who was playing, but it was also one of the worst ones I've ever seen. I just think this charge stuff's getting out of control in this tournament. Again, not to go off on a tangent here, but I'm not sure that we are doing anything for the game based on some of these charges that have been called. I'm not sure what the emphasis is on some of this, but it's bad. And that's was just another example. But again, I mean, did that determine the game? No. But I thought it was one that probably, if that's a block and Cam Thomas, he's going to make both free throws. All of a sudden, it's a 4-point game. You get a stop, you get a 3. It's a completely different thing. But just didn't go in their favor. So.
All right. Any other NCAA tournament related thoughts before we flip to baseball? Blake, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I think we start to look ahead now. And again, I said this yesterday, and I don't want to jinx it for either one of these two teams. But if you're Alabama and you're Arkansas, and we say before the tournament that you're going to get to the Sweet 16 and play the number 11 seed and the number 15 seed in your region, I think you have to feel pretty good about that. So I think, Barry said it a minute ago, I honestly think that Alabama matches up better with UCLA than maybe they did Maryland. I could be completely wrong, but I've already started to look at the numbers, and I just think Alabama is going to be able to kind of counteract some of the things that the UCLA does best. And UCLA is a team that doesn't necessarily guard the 3 that particularly well. So I think the matchup sets up pretty nicely there. And as we talked about with Arkansas, they've already played Oral Roberts once. I think that's probably still going to be a game that we know if Oral Roberts is hitting 3s and making shots, they're going to test Arkansas. But if not, that's a bad defensive team, and they just don't play defense to the level that they do offense. So I just, again, if you're looking at 11 and a 15 in your Sweet 16 part of the bracket, I don't know that you could have asked for a better setup for either one of these two teams.
Barry, your turn to close our hoops thoughts for today.
Well, I think it's exciting to have, the potential of Arkansas and Alabama, moving on to the Elite 8. And Arkansas's played Oral Roberts already this year. They won 87-76 in Fayetteville in December. A lot of people criticized Arkansas, their non-conference schedule. Then you go look at it. You got North Texas has made the tournament. You got Oral Roberts, Abilene Christian. So there's 3 teams in their non-conference that may not be household names that are made some nice runs in the tournament. And I think Alabama and Arkansas both have a chance to be in the Elite 8. I certainly think the way they're playing, they have a chance to be in the Final 4. I've been really impressed with the Pac-12, the run they have. What are they, 9-1? The only loss was last night, Colorado losing to Florida State. USC playing really well last night. I mean, that was more like a Sun Bowl than an NCAA tournament game. I mean, USC beating Kansas by 30. That felt more like the John Hancock Sun Bowl on Christmas Eve on CBS. That's assuming Kansas could win enough football games to get to a bowl game. But that was a beatdown last night with Kansas. I've been real impressed with the Pac-12 and how they've played into postseason, and not impressed with the Big Ten and how they played. Even though they've got one team left, it's a 1 seed, and a lot of people think they've got a shot to go to the championship game and play Gonzaga. But and then just the fun of it. I mean, Blake, you and Chris both know this is not going to happen in football. You're not going to have these kind of upsets and teams. I mean, it's going to be the same 6, 7, 8 teams every year in football playing in a college football playoff, but you're not going to have teams that like, oh, where are they? I've never even heard of them, and they beat Illinois, or this team beat so-and-so. I mean, Abilene Christian, they could play Texas 1,000 times in football, and they're never going to win. They're never going to win. But they play one time in basketball in March Madness, and they win, and they upset them. And to me, that's what's fun. That's what's fun about it, and it just makes this time of the year real exciting. But still a lot of good basketball left with the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, and then on to the Final Four. So we got a lot of good games left.
Blake, I want to kick it back to you because I know you had some thoughts on the SEC and its run to the Sweet 16 that we talked about last night. But I just checked Ken Palm. USC now up to 6. Goodness gracious. And when did Colorado jump up into the top 10? Buffalo's at number 10 this morning. That kind of jumps off the page, too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I checked that last night, and I was looking at, I didn't realize USC had jumped that high, but Colorado's kind of been hovering in that top tier for a while now, and I don't know, like that was, that's a team that I know Florida State won, but yeah, that was, you just look at it overall, as we talk about the seeding process sometimes, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like we said, Loyola Chicago was the team that came in as the 9 and wound up as, an 8 seed or whatever. And then USC now is a 6 seed, and they're number 6 in Ken Palm. So it's certainly interesting to look at the numbers. But yeah, I put out the tweet on Monday night after Alabama won, and I just started looking this up. I had no idea. Like I didn't know what I was going to get into when I started looking at this, but I was starting to think. I was like, wait a second, Alabama and Arkansas, like they both get to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a while. And then I was thinking back to the 2019 tournament. I was like, well, there's several teams that made it there. And I was like, how many SEC teams have actually made the Sweet 16 like in the past several years? Well, here's the number. 9 different SEC teams have made the Sweet 16 in the past 4 NCAA tournaments. Like, that's pretty incredible when you think about where SEC basketball was at, I don't know, however many years ago. You've had 9 different teams make the Sweet 16 in the last 4 tournaments. Here's something else for you. I just realized, and I was looking at this morning. I did not, I guess you probably think about it and you're like, well, that makes sense. But if you really want to hammer home the improved commitment to basketball, 13 of the 14 SEC schools have earned a NCAA tournament bid in the past 4 NCAA tournaments. You want to guess the only one that hasn't? I'm sure you may think of it off the top of your head, but any guesses?
Mississippi State?
No, Georgia.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yep, Georgia's the only team that has not made the tournament in the last 4. So that's, now look, I could probably look at some other conferences and maybe, I don't know, the ACC. I don't know if that's the number or not. I'm trying to think if, I don't like Boston College. I don't think they've made it in a while, have they? Maybe I'm wrong. But
No.
Still, like 13 of your 14 teams have made the tournament in the past 4. And you've had 9 of those, so more than half of yours that have made the Sweet 16. So if we want to talk about the pressure and the competitiveness of SEC basketball, I think that pretty much shows you where it's at now when you have that many different schools that have made it that far. So I don't know. I look at that and I'm thinking, man, we talk about pressure on coaches and everybody wanting to win. Well, it's as competitive as ever when you just look at those stats, so.
Yeah, the 5 teams that have made it in that 4-year span, both Mississippi's, Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Missouri. And Missouri, at one time, I don't know if it still is, was considered, that and BYU maybe, is the best 2 programs to never make a Final Four. Georgia's been to a Final Four, although it's been 40 years now. Vanderbilt's never been, but it's been to an Elite 8 and a few Sweet 16s. Mississippi State's been to a Final Four. Ole Miss has been, I think, to a Sweet 16. So even with the misses, and I think Vanderbilt's going to be down for a while, and I'm not quite sure about where things are headed at Mississippi schools or Georgia, but Missouri, another one too we could talk about. But even the schools that haven't been have had some solid history of basketball success too.
Yep, they have, and it's just I think about where the SEC. What was it? I don't remember the year the SEC got 3 teams into the tournament. That wasn't that long ago, if we think about it. And now I'm looking up. I'm like, it wasn't that long ago. The SEC only got 3 teams in the tournament. Now they've had 9 in the Sweet 16 in the past 4, and 13 of their 14 have made the tournament. And so it's just. That's wild, man. We talk about if you want to make the commitment, and that's what you got to give, the late Mike Slive and Greg Sankey and everyone involved. My goodness, they have made the commitment, and it is kind of showing because they, to have this many teams make it to the tournament. I mean, it was not that long ago where we kept looking up and saying, well, it's Kentucky, it's Florida. Who else is going to step up? Like Tennessee every now and then, some of these other teams, but we just kept waiting to try to figure out, when is that next step or when is the SEC going to take that next step as a conference? And I think it's pretty clear that they've made it to that point.
Barry, let's talk baseball. The SEC number one again the polls. Now, depends on which poll you consult as to which team it is. Some have Arkansas staying at number one. Some have Vanderbilt. Again, pretty much the top 5 teams in the country are SEC teams, according to the pollsters. The others, of course, both the Mississippi schools and Florida. But it just continues every week. It just seems like the SEC just dominates the conversation.
Yeah, they do, and it's because they're the best league in baseball in the country. And we've had 4 number 1 teams already: Florida, Ole Miss, Arkansas, and now Vanderbilt. And probably theoretically Mississippi State could make a run for that and be 5. I don't know that we would get any more, than that. But to have, potentially could have 5 different teams ranked number 1 in the country during the course of the season is, shows the depth of your league and also shows how good your teams really are. And, I think it said something this weekend that the 2 teams that were picked to win their respective divisions, Florida in the East and Ole Miss in the West, both started 3-0. And so I think it just shows how good the league is and how many really, really good teams there are and can, could potentially end up not only just in the tournament, but in the super regionals and in Omaha.
Yeah, you could almost even make an argument that Mississippi State is the best team. I don't know that I would, but I think if you made it, I think there's a defense for it.
Oh, I certainly think you could. I mean, and I think at some point this year they'll be ranked number 1 in one of the polls. I certainly think the way they pitch and they get enough offense. They've had that late game magic where they've had several walk-off wins and they pitch extremely well and they it's a daunting schedule for them just like it is for all the other teams in the league. But they're the number 1 ERA team in the league. Opponents hit only 176 against them. I mean, they gave up 8 runs to LSU on Sunday. They'd given up 5 runs in the 9 games prior to Sunday, and it held LSU to 1 run in 18 innings. So they can pitch. And, it doesn't take a lot to win when your pitching staff goes out there and gives up 0. I mean, it's not hard to score 1. I mean, it's hard to score. If you can't score, it's hard to ask your pitchers to go throw shutouts for 12 innings till maybe we can scratch one out. But if you score 4 or 5 runs and your pitching staff is throwing up 0s and 1s every night, it takes a lot of pressure off their offense. And even though they're only hitting 269 in the league, which is 10th in the league, they don't really need a whole lot of offense because of the way they pitch.
Barry, the big news this weekend was Jack Leiter and Vanderbilt. A day after Kumar Rocker was dominant in his own right, he strikes out 14 Gamecocks in 8 innings, gives up 2 runs, both earned, frankly, with a little better defense. He might have had a 0 there. But in any case, Leiter outdoes him on Saturday, retires the last 27 hitters of the game. Again, I was there. It's one of the best athletic performances I've ever seen. Those 2 pitchers are the talk of the college baseball world right now. And other than Trevor Bauer and Garrett Cole, back that's been 8-9 years now. I don't know that we've ever seen anything like this.
Yeah, I don't either. I can't think of anybody in the, 30 some years I've been watching SEC baseball and college baseball for that matter that are as dominant as these two guys. And, what Leiter did Saturday was incredible. Walks a leadoff hitter, shakes that off and retires, the next 27 in a row and gets the no-hitter, first no-hitter, regular season no-hitter at Vanderbilt since 1971, and matched what Kumar Rocker did in the Supers against Duke a few years ago. I don't know that any SEC teams ever had two starters with no hitters at the same time. I mean, in their career. So they've got their number one and their number two guy, Rocker and Leiter, have career no hitters, for them, and just incredible. It was a third no hitter this year in Division I baseball, and just an incredible performance. His dad was there. His dad threw a no hitter, the first no hitter in Marlins history in 1996, and it was just an incredible performance. I have still not seen it yet. I do have it on DVR. I do plan to watch it just because I want to see the excitement. I've seen the last inning, but I want to see the excitement of it. But just a ton of strikeouts, and it's hard to do that with a lot of strikeouts. I mean, he struck out 16, and the pitch count was up. And you think at some point somebody's going to, dump one in, and ground ball's going to sneak through. But he was totally dominant in that game, and one of the most incredible pitching performances I've seen at any level, a long time.
Barry, let's talk Florida. I think you went out on a limb to take Texas A&M to win that series in Gainesville. Florida won it and fairly commandingly. Burst out the bats on Friday night, 13 runs. I think it's 9 in the first 3 or 4 innings. But baseball is a long season. Sometimes it takes a team to find its way, and I'm curious if that's what's happening with the Gamecocks not the Gamecocks, the Gators, because they were everybody's consensus preseason number 1. They've had some bumps in the road. You had a loss to Florida State in the midweek right before that, although, goodness gracious, that program may be as hot as anybody in the country right now, Florida State. But it seemed like a big step in the right direction for Florida this weekend.
Well, it was a huge step in the right direction for them. And I did. I went out on a limb. I thought A&M was playing really well. I thought Florida was a little vulnerable. But, the Gators showed why they were the preseason pick to win the East and the pick to win the SEC. And very, very surprisingly, the key ingredients for them this weekend were 3 freshmen. And then we all know Kevin O'Sullivan can recruit. We all know he's had the number 1 recruiting class in the country, consistent top 5 recruiting classes in the country. But, show up on the first weekend of SEC play, you got your tail kicked Tuesday night by your rival, Florida State, 10-2. And, you're probably not feeling real good about yourself going into this A&M series, which started on Thursday. So they had one less day to get ready for the Aggies. But, Kevin Hickey, Matt Gossett, and Colby Halter, 3 freshmen. They go 17 for 34 in the series with 7 runs scored and 7 RBI. Hickey's been the starting catcher. Now he's the DH because they wanted to get Gossett in the lineup. So now he's the catcher. And those guys Hickey's hitting in the 4-hole, 5-hole. Gossett and Halter hit 8, 9 in the series with A&M. And they really produced. I mean, they got it done. Now, how are they going to do over the course of a season? Because they're freshmen and this league eats you up as a young player. But, Florida's always had a lot of really talented kids, bring in good players, good talented freshmen. And those 3 right there just jump right off the page because they were in the middle of both innings Thursday night. They were in the middle of the big inning Florida had Friday night to clinch the series. And they all had key at bats on Saturday that extended the lead Saturday against A&M and ended up resulting in the sweep for them. In addition to Judd Fabian, who was co-player of the week, and in addition to Jacob Young, and in addition to that deep and talented starting pitching staff, the Gators, I think the starters gave up 2 runs and struck out 21 batters in 20 innings. This weekend, Mace, Leftwich, and Barco, really, really good, talented teams. But but the freshman jumped off the page for me this weekend for the Gators.
Gators had one of two sweeps this weekend. The other one was Ole Miss, which handled Auburn in Oxford. That Sunday game got a little ugly in terms of bullpens. What are your takeaways on both those teams after seeing how that series went?
Well, one interesting thing in that series is to find out that Auburn hadn't won a game in Oxford since 2012. They've been swept the last 4 times they've gone to Swayze Field. So the Rebels have won 12 in a row at home against the Tigers. I think Auburn would be very happy to try to negotiate a deal the next time they go over there and play somewhere other than Swayze Field, because they've struggled there. I mean, it's historically they've struggled there. I think Ole Miss sweeping this weekend without Nikhazy, their number one guy who's missed 2 weeks in a row now with a muscle strain in his chest, and to get Derek Diamond back on track on Sunday. He gave them 6 shutout innings. That's about the only pitcher Sunday that got anything done for either side. As the teams put together Sunday, they used 10 relief pitchers combined, and the bullpens gave up 23 runs on Sunday. Auburn's much worse than Ole Miss's bullpen, because Ole Miss was playing with a 14-0 lead in the 8th inning, and Auburn got 9. And then Auburn promptly came back and gave up 5 and ends up losing 19-11 in a shootout on Sunday. The big concern for me is Auburn's pitching. I mean, it's just not there. They've struggled. They brought Jack Owen in this weekend, first time he's pitched all year. They bring him in the 8th inning as they've cut it to 14-9, and lo and behold, he gives up 5 runs and gets 1 out. They got to get him out of there. Fitz still hadn't gotten it figured out yet, even though he had a good midweek appearance against Lipscomb. Bright on Sunday, second straight Sunday that he hasn't pitched well. They've tinkered with their rotation. They've had 5 weekend series. They've had 5 different starting rotations. They have got to get it figured out on the mound. They have the second worst ERA in the league at 4.48. They've given up 94 runs this season. They've given up 41 runs the last 3 Sundays. That's 46% of their runs that they've allowed this year have come in their last 3 Sunday games. That was with a 9-0 lead against Boston College, gave up 9 in the 9th, lost 11-9, gave up 11 to Little Rock the week before, and 19 to Ole Miss on Sunday. They got to figure it out on Sunday, and they got to figure out the back end of their bullpen, or it could be a long, long year for Auburn, because they're a good offensive club. They lead the league in hitting at 315, and Tyler Miller leads the league at 411, and they've got some really good offensive players, and Williams and Bliss and Woley and more, but they've got to get it figured out on the mound, and I'm not sure where that answer is going to come from.
Maybe the weirdest series of the weekend was Alabama going to Arkansas. Alabama without Connor Prelip, its ace, and it sounds like they're going to be without him a long time potentially. Bama goes in and wins 16-1 against the number 1 team in the country, then loses 9-1 and 3-1 in the 2 final games. What did you take away from that series?
Well, one thing I took away with is the losing team got beat 28-3 in the series. 2 non-competitive games early, but then the Sunday game was, a nice Sunday afternoon game, 3-1 game. You don't see a lot of those on Sunday, but just one thing with Alabama, just after the game Friday night, just did nothing on offense. I mean, they had 2 runs and 5 hits the rest of the weekend. Their only run Sunday came on a home run in the 9th inning by Sam Prater on a really nice 11-pitch at bat. But other than that, they did nothing on offense the rest of the weekend. And I think Arkansas, Lyle Lockhart and Zebulon Vermillion, gets a lot of credit for that, because I thought they pitched extremely well. And the one key for me, Arkansas for the weekend, was Friday night, the 16-1 game. Patrick Wicklander comes in and goes 5 1/3 and gives up only 1 run and settle that game down and save their bullpen, because that could have been an ugly night and gotten into the bullpen and hurt them a little bit later on, for the weekend. But he came in and settled it down Friday night, and they were able to save some of their arms for Saturday and Sunday, and they turned around, they won the game. And Opitz had a really good weekend for them. Slavens had a really good weekend for them. And I think, it's good for Arkansas to put a, 3-game losing streak to bed and bounce back Saturday and Sunday and take the series at home, because it was crucial that they win, because they got to go to Mississippi State this weekend, and that would not have been good going to Starkville, 1-2 or 0-3.
Arkansas has been able to get to Omaha without having great starting pitching. I've seen the Hogs many a time where you get to Saturday and Sunday and they're struggling to get a starter into the 4th and 5th innings, but the bats are usually good enough to where they can do that. I have a feeling with this team, I think it's that kind of team again. I don't think this is a number one in the country type of team. I do think it's maybe a get to Omaha team, but I just see the same pattern with Arkansas's pitching. I don't think that they've got the top end arms like the rest of the league has, and I suspect that's going to take a toll. Again, doesn't make them a bad club. We just know how strong the league is, and I look at some of the other top teams, and I just get the impression that the pitching does not stack up with some of the others favorably.
No, and one thing for them is, and I don't have this written down, I just, in studying the boxes every night, there's not a lot of games out there where their starter, gets past the 5th inning. Even Sunday, Lockhart pitched well, but he only got 4 2/3 innings. I mean, Vermillion's first 3 starts, I don't think he got to the 4th inning either time, but he's given them 8 innings the last 2 weeks as the number 2 guy. Maybe he wasn't fitted, settled in for that number 1 role, so they bump him back to Saturday, and then against Louisiana Tech and Alabama, he gives them 8 really solid innings. They can handle that on Saturday. That'll work. Pallette, it happened for him. It's just a bad night. Everybody's going to get roughed up a little bit. In this league, you're going to get beat up a couple of times, and he didn't pitch well Friday night. I think he's had 1 start, maybe 2, where he's gotten in the 5th inning or longer this year. Their starters just do not go deep into the game. But they do have a deep bullpen. They have a lot of guys with a lot of experience. We mentioned Wicklander, and they've got Cops and just guys that have pitched Maxon, just guys that have pitched for them a long, long time. And they just, Noland, who played quarterback some for them, has pitched as a starter and a reliever. They've got veterans, they've got experience, they've got depth there, and that's what's going to help them in their bullpen and in their pitching staff, which is 12th in the league in ERA, but they're 13th in the league in hitting. I mean, they're only hitting .266, and I don't think that's gonna last all year. I think they're going to start hitting, because I think their lineup is really good with Moore at the top, and then they have Wallace and Opitz and Slavens and Christian Franklin, and I think they have some bats in the lineup that'll get things going, but probably not the number 1 team in the country like everybody's had, and certainly not top shelf arms like, Vanderbilt, Florida, some of the Ole Miss, Mississippi State, some of the other teams. But, just always, to me, Arkansas has always been a really good, solid team, and they've always been able to hit.
I know that LSU has really taken it to Mississippi State in recent years, but the Bulldogs kind of flipped the script on them. I think you were surprised at that. I probably wasn't. Of course, you have better knowledge of history with that than I do. I just did not see LSU's pitching matching up with Mississippi State's. The Bulldogs just continue to roll, and I think that's an elite team.
They are, but I do think LSU pitched pretty well all weekend long. Both games Friday and Saturday were scoreless into the 5th inning. I mean, LSU's going to be in the games because of Hill, Labus, and Marceau, Marceau still hasn't allowed an earned run this year. But when you get to that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th guy all the way down to the 13th or 14th, no, they don't match up with Mississippi State. And that's where, they lost the game Friday. That's where they lost the game Saturday. And then Sunday kind of got away from Mississippi State. Which was interesting because Fristow took the loss, the freshman, and he's been used to starting on Sunday. Sarantola starts on Sunday, maybe his 5th not real good start of the year, and then Fristow comes in out of the pen. That's kind of a new thing for him, and they score the runs on him to win the game, and that's how they won the game and avoided the sweep. But LSU has had a lot of success with Mississippi State over the years, but it wasn't this weekend for them. And just a deep, too deep pitching staff for Mississippi State, in that series. It was interesting going in. I was looking Sunday, LSU, if they lose the game Sunday, Mississippi State hadn't swept LSU in a 3-game series in 40 years, 1981 in Baton Rouge. They were trying to do that on Sunday, and as good as their pitching staff is and as good as they are, they still couldn't do it because LSU found a way to win. They got some really good play Sunday out of, Doty and Dugas. Dugas hit the go-ahead home run Sunday, and then Brody Dorst hit a 2-run homer late in the game. And, that's how LSU wins, is hitting home runs. But, for the most part, starter-wise, they matched up fairly well with Mississippi State this weekend. But where Mississippi State's going to get you is number 4 through number 16. And a lot of guys just can't match up with them like that.
What do you think State ends up doing on Sunday? Because I think Sarantola has just been not a good option for them, as you mentioned. And like you said, they've got so many arms. Now, I don't know how many of them can go 5 or 6 innings, which you don't necessarily have to have your starter do all the time these days in the third game of the series. And again, especially not if you're Mississippi State. I look at Landon Sims. He's been that super reliever for them where he goes 13 2/3 innings. He struck out 32. I don't know that you want to break him in that spot. I don't even know if he could go that far, but Will Bednar's been maybe an option we've talked about a little bit. But where do you think State settles on that in the coming weeks?
To me, I think their best rotation would be McLeod, Bednar, and Fristow. Fristo's handled that Sunday game all week, all year. It's been really good. I don't think they've lost a Sunday game or the third game of a series all year. It was part of the no-hitter against Kent a couple of weeks ago. I think that's the first time they've really used him out of the pen. And he gave up a couple of runs. I mean, LSU hit a home run on him. I mean, LSU's going to hit a home run on some people. But maybe that's not his comfort level. I know Sarantola can throw it through a wall. I mean, he can rear back and throw it through a wall. I saw something on Twitter. Mississippi State put out he's got the highest velo of anybody on their team. But, if you can throw it through a wall, that's fine. But can you get people out? And if you can't get people out, to me, it doesn't really matter if you throw it through the wall or not. But I think their fans, are kind of getting a little frustrated, with that. That's 5 starts for him that hasn't been that great. So maybe they settle with McLeod and Bednar and Fristow and use him out of the pen. I don't think Sims is an option as a starter because I think he's just too valuable in the bullpen for me. I don't know that I'd want him starting. I think I'd rather have him twice on the weekend for a couple of innings than one time for 3 or 4. And then you don't know how he would handle a starting role. I mean, he may come out and throw a no-hitter. I don't know. But I think he's found his comfort level in the back end of that bullpen, and he can come in and pump 95 to 98, 99 and strike out guys. He goes, look, I got 1 inning, I got 9 pitches, I'm going to throw 9 strikes, and we're going to get out of here. And I think that's kind of the mentality that he has. But they've got so many options on the mound that they could tinker with that a lot and try to figure out, the right steps for them. And I'm sure Chris Lemonis, I'm not sure. I know he will find the answers to that because he's a good coach and he knows his staff better than anybody else. And I think he'll find the answers to get them settled in on a Sunday. But we're talking about one guy that's kind of struggled. They still got a 2.36 ERA. They have 259 strikeouts and 179 innings. So I don't know how much of a problem that really is because they're really talented.
I've been really impressed with Tennessee this year. I don't think the Vols are that elite level team, but I'm anxious to see them lock horns with some of those teams to see how that goes. But Tennessee, a few weekends back, I guess a couple weekends ago, loses a series to Indiana State, which didn't end up being a bad series loss. Indiana State, I think, now in the top 25. Well, I take that back. They didn't lose it. It was 2-2. But that team now ranked. So, again, not that we thought it was a bad loss. Indiana State's had a good program at times. Sweeps Georgia State a couple weeks ago. Goes to Greensboro and pulls a sweep. But then goes to Athens, loses the middle game 5-4, but takes the first and third games. That was a series I think both of us were interested to watch. We felt those were 2 fairly evenly matched teams. Probably Tennessee with the better hitting, Georgia with the better pitching, but both pretty solid on each side of the ball, especially the Vols offensively. What did you take away from Tennessee, Georgia?
Well, I like the way Tennessee has played. I mean, and I think Georgia's still underrated. I think they're kind of under the radar. Missed an opportunity to get a series win at home, but Tennessee's won 4 of their 5 series, and as you said, split the other with Indiana State, who just happens to be third this morning in Warren Nolan's RPI behind Arkansas and East Carolina. Tennessee is 8th in the RPI, Warren Nolan, as of this morning. I think Tennessee's a really good team. I think they have played well. I think they're kind of a lot like Alabama, a little bit in the fact that these kids had the season last year and it was ended, and then they've had the start they've had this year. They don't know that Tennessee's supposed to be bad. These kids don't know that. Some of these guys are young kids, and some of them hadn't played in the SEC in a couple of years. They don't know that Tennessee's supposed to be a bad team, and they're not. They're 17-4. They're 11-2 at home, 6-2 on the road, and played really well this weekend. I think Liam Spence is a real catalyst for them at the leadoff spot in the order. He's a senior transfer, but he didn't get to play in the SEC junior eligibility-wise, but didn't play in the SEC last year. I think Rucker has hit the ball really well for them. Drew Gilbert has hit the ball really well for them. They have 3 grand slams. I mean, in the middle of the order hits well. Dallas has pitched well. Blake Tidwell threw a really good game on Sunday to earn SEC pitching honors this week as like the newcomer of the week. Will Heflin has been good. Their bullpen has been solid. So I think Tennessee's has gaining attention from people. They're ranked. They're way up high in the RPI. Now they come home this weekend and play LSU, and now I think we'll find out just kind of a lot about what the Tennessee Vol baseball program is under Tony Vitello, who's done a really nice job recruiting and bringing in some really good players.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that one this weekend, too. Last one we haven't talked about, Missouri and Kentucky. Tigers finally got a win and, frankly, played a lot better the last 2 games of that series. What did you take away from that? I think we still don't expect Missouri to be at the level of the other teams, but getting a win in that spot, I think, was good for that program.
Yeah, 0-3 would have been tough, for them. I think they're still probably going to be the last place team in the league based on their schedule, and certainly a daunting task this weekend going home and hosting Vanderbilt for 3. So I think getting a win, gives them a little excitement with Vanderbilt coming in, try to see what they can do against, that pitching staff. I think 0-3, very easily could be 0. If they didn't win Sunday, they could very easily be 0-6 and really out of it. They struggle offensively. Joshua Day is probably their best offensive player, but, hats off to Cameron Swanger. Gets a pinch hit in the 8th inning and hits a 3-run bomb and gives Missouri the win. And, Kentucky probably a little disappointed they didn't get the sweep, but, played pretty good Saturday, played real well in the opener Friday night to win that series and get off to a decent start. And then they go to Auburn this weekend. Chance for Kentucky to maybe start 4-2 going to Auburn this week with the way Auburn pitches. But, good weekend for Kentucky overall, and then a, salvaging moment for Missouri not to be swept and, getting a key pinch hit home run late to, maybe give them a little momentum.
Barry, any final thoughts on baseball? Anything we didn't get to today?
Well, I think just, we'll talk more Thursday, but just a lot of interesting matchups this weekend, and it's going to be that way now from now on. I'm really interested in Ole Miss and Alabama coming up this weekend. Florida going to South Carolina. Can the Gamecocks get right? Critical home series for A&M, 0-3 hosting Georgia. So 2 teams that coming off series losses, and how can Tennessee handle prosperity with LSU coming to town? And just a balanced league. A lot of really, as we say this every week, just good teams everywhere, and you just got to try to figure out how to win a series each and every week. Some of these teams, and you can't lose home series, and those really hurt. And we talked about it earlier. I need to see I need to see Auburn, improve on pitching. That's one thing that really scares me for them, is that they've really struggled on the mound. They're 11-8. I mean, they're in trouble. They got Kentucky this week, but they've got to get some things straightened out on the mound, and just kind of see where we go from there, and what who's going to step up this week and get something done for their team. I think I think it's good. It always seems like there's somebody different, every day. As we write about on the blog each night, we started as the conference began, picking a team of the day and a, game of the day and hitter and a pitcher of the day every day. And we hadn't had the same team or player. I think we shared it, all 3 days, there was somebody different every day with that. So that just shows you the depth and the balance of the league and how good these teams are and how exciting that this race is going to be.
Blake, I'm going to throw it back to you to close the podcast today with your closing thoughts. And, of course, tell folks where they can find us on the internet, where they can find us on social media, anything else like that that would be of use to our listeners.
Yep, lots happening, as you guys talked about with baseball, and certainly we'll get more into the Sweet 16 matchups in basketball throughout the week. But you can find everything at southeastern14.com. Follow our Twitter at 14 Southeastern. All that good stuff. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a nice 5-star rating review so we can reach more people here as we get into the swing of baseball and talk about some Sweet 16 action. So, yeah, check everything out there.
All right. Thanks for listening to our show today. We'll be back on Wednesday. I'm Chris Lee, host of the 14 for Barry Allen and Blake Lovell. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. But anyway, thank you for listening. We'll be back with another show on Wednesday.